ask me about living trust.
So you got this made just for this, right?
I got this made just for this.
That's awesome. I love it.
I saw it on Instagram, but it said ask me about real estate, and it was a last minute thing, and I couldn't find anybody to do it.
Yeah.
And yesterday I had a meeting in La Mirada, and as I'm driving, I stopped by a light. I don't know where it was, and I turned to the left, and there's this print shop that said like T-shirt mart or whatever, and like embroidering, custom made, and all that stuff. So I was like, all right, it's a sign. I got to do it. I thought about it, but
That's awesome. I'm glad you're able to get it made and be able to come here wearing the shirt.
Thank you.
For those, I have a little bit of an idea of what a living trust is, but I'm really excited because, like I was mentioning to you earlier, I really wanted you to come here because I wanted to be like the student here and just learn about living trust. And I feel like this is something that would be beneficial for everybody. Everyone always talks about owning real estate, but no one really talks about what to do afterwards. So what is a living trust and why should people get it? Or maybe why should they not? Or I don't know, maybe you could kind of give us some insight on that.
Yeah. So, for example, a living trust is a document that you get to establish while you're alive as to how you want everything to be handled when you are no longer here. There's a difference between a living will and testament, and a living trust. A living will, you can pretty much, get a piece of paper and write down who you want to leave as in charge and all that stuff. But unfortunately, that will not prevent probate. Probate is it's a legal process that happens when you happen to pass and there's no wishes as to how you wanted everything to be done, and your beneficiaries, your children, family, whoever, may contest portions of that estate if you don't have anything established. Creates a lot of headache for the people that you left behind. But when you have a trust, a living trust, that transfer of powers automatically, because you get to establish who your successor trustee will be. I always call it like the little soldier of the family, because they're the ones that are going to be dealing with attorneys, city officials, real estate agents, insurance people, in the case that you want to sell, liquidate your assets.
Right.
You also establish who your beneficiaries will be, who you're leaving your estate to, and the percentages, how you want everything to be distributed. So that's very important to do because there's a lot of advantages in having that. Just probate being one. I always say that you got to think about it that at one point in time in history, someone had a lot of money and said, how am I going to protect everything that I have for myself and for my future generations? So they brilliantly came up with the living trust. So it definitely helps out in the sense of having that peace of mind that you'll know that your family will be taken care of once you're no longer here.
And I actually have a question. So is it just for real estate, or what could you put in the living trust?
In the living trust, you can put, what happens is when you create the trust, you vest it, meaning that you transfer that power, you protect it with real estate. You are individually transferring it and putting it into your trust. You have life insurance policies that go into it, 401ks, cash plans. You have businesses. A lot of customers have businesses, corporations, LLCs,
Right.
so they'll be able to also protect that. A living trust allows you to do a vast number of things. You can purchase corporations, you can establish corporations, you can do business. You're able to get an EIN number attached to the trust, so that way you can go ahead and create businesses. A lot of celebrities, don't have their one trust or one corporation. They have many for whatever reason that may pertain to, but you're able to work off the living trust kind of like a little shelter, like a little umbrella that will allow you to be able to.
Can you put like physical items in the living trust? Like, for example, like if someone has like a vintage car.
Oh yeah, you
Okay.
can definitely put in there. It happened to me once where the gentleman that was creating the trust wanted that particular car. It was like 1924. I don't remember which car
Wow.
kind of was. So his dad gave that to him, and he wanted to give it to his dad. So he wanted for that generations to pass. So the ownership of that will be the trust. And you kind of keep moving on it, changing the trust or changing that. So you're able to put checking accounts, savings accounts, IRAs, annuities. The only thing is that you would have to go to whatever particular bank you deal with, and then you take
Right.
your living trust package, and then they vest it, they seal it under that particular thing, under that particular trust.
Is there anything that you can't put in a living trust?
No, I mean, you can put cars into the trust. You can put mobile homes. You can put. I mean, you can pretty much. There's a gentleman. I read an article that said, when you establish a corporation, for example, for whatever state you establish it, you're being sponsored by that particular state. So you have to abide by the rules of the state.
Right.
Not saying that the living trust excludes from that, but when you create a trust, you're doing it on your own. So you're doing it to protect your own. There's no sponsorship by any state or anything like that. Each state has their own rules, but you're able to secure under that.
And what are the, I guess, tax benefits, like if there's any, right? Because I always hear that, especially when you're building wealth, you want to be able to pass it on to basically build once you have wealth, right? Being able to build generational wealth for other generations ahead of you. So how can a living trust benefit those who are going to inherit what you've created?
So what happens when you have a trust? The purpose of that is for your loved ones to kind of carry on that. So if you happen to pass and you still owe money on your mortgage, your family members can still continue with that property with not having to be obligated to sell. Right. Because of probate or because of whatever particular reason. So you're able to move that along. So you have that advantage. You're able to transfer that ownership into, let's say your living trust, and you continue on that protection, from generations. When for tax benefits, obviously, it'd be best to consult a CPA.
Right.
But one of the benefits is that, property taxes stay the same as long as you keep it under the trust. Then there's, inheritance tax that is very minimal in comparison to, having to go to probate, where there's, it's a lengthy process that at the end of the day is going to cost everything time and money. Creditors are called if you happen to die of natural causes, and once you pass probate starts, the court notifies state agencies, county agencies, city agencies, and one of those is Medi-Cal, Medicaid. So if you die of natural causes, they'll be like, hey, the John Doe owe you any money? Yeah, they do. Then go ahead and send us the bill because we'll pay it through probate court.
So hold on. So if someone owed someone money, right? And if their assets were in a living trust, they cannot go after it?
Because that transfer of power is automatically. So courts are kind of taken away from that because you have that document already as indicated who's going to carry on with what you have.
But if they didn't have that trust, they can go after it.
They can go after it through probate. I have a friend who is dealing with a court with a probate. I believe they're going on 2 years now, and a mechanic found out that this gentleman had passed and sent a bill to the court saying that the gentleman that passed owes him $26,000 worth of work that he did on a car or a vehicle that he had. So
no way.
and so there's there's a whole number of things that can happen. You know, attorneys obviously they're fighting for you to try to get it out of probate, or if it goes into
Right.
probate. But at the end of the day, you know, everything eats up. And I believe this particular case, they had like 2 or 3 homes, and after all the lengthy process that has happened, the my friend was telling me that they'll be lucky if 3 kids. They'll be lucky if they stay with like 20,000 each. So
Whoa.
after all that process, because a lot of creditors come, you know, especially in our Latino community, you know, we come from different countries around, you know, Latin America. So the court doesn't know if you had kids, you know, prior
Right.
to getting married, during your marriage or after marriage. So they have to give that space and time for anybody to be uh, to find out, to see if mom and dad had passed, and get that opportunity to contest that asset. So it creates a big problem, big ordeal
And that's when going through probate.
when going.
So, I know what probate is, but for those that might not know, can you elaborate a little bit on probate and why that's a bad thing?
Mm, what happens is when you happen to pass, since we live here in California, the state kind of takes over,
Right.
and there's cases that if businesses are run and no trust has been established, the business accounts are frozen, you know, because they don't know you know, the court doesn't know how you want everything to be handled when you're no longer here. So probate takes over, and there's been instances where maybe mortgage companies are not allowed to take mortgage payments because they don't know what's going to happen. Once the courts get involved, it just creates that. So probate is a process that is intended to protect the assets of the person that has passed, but you have to satisfy all debts,
Right.
everything, before you're
Able to inherit.
before you're able to inherit. When you have the trust, then that transfer power is automatically. So mom can pass away today, and you can literally put the property out for sale tomorrow if you have a trust, and you know, or you could do it 10 years, 15 years after.
So pretty much a trust it's kind of like a instruction manual.
Pretty much, yeah. An instruction manual as to how everything is to be done when you are no longer here. Like I said, a will can do that, but it would just show the judge kind of like a guidance as to how you want everything to be done after all debts have been satisfied or after probate has been closed. But when you have the trust, it doesn't work. Courts don't get involved. You know, banks allow you to stay because you have that protection. Because when I establish the trust, I make sure that, you know, that the properties are vested into the trust,
Right.
and to, you know, assure that later on down the future they're able to, you know, contest that and, you know, have that full authority to do as the trust has indicated.
That's pretty interesting. So what would you say is probably, like, do you have any stories or scenarios that I'm sure you have, like, of like how if they didn't create the trust, right, they probably would have been in some trouble or could have, like, do you have anything that you could
Yeah,
share?
no, so I was doing a trust for a gentleman, and he, you know, tells me, hey, I want you to help my mom out. So the mom comes in. She goes, mijo, as soon as you're done with my son, I want you to help me with my trust. Yeah, of course, you know. So this particular client had a lot of property, so it took me a lot longer to finish it. By the time I contacted him, and I said, you know, I have everything ready, have the notary. I don't remember which day it was, but I said, let's meet up a certain day. He goes, Cesar, I can't. The problem is that my mom had passed away during that period of time. So they, you know how brothers and sisters, kind of ones you get along better with the other. This particular lady, rest in peace, she had a sister that lived in the state of Washington. So she flew in and said, mijo, you know, to her nephew, I came here to bury your mom. as Latinos or in any culture, tias stay at the house as long as you may need to.
Yeah.
Mi casa, su casa.
Right.
So they buried the lady. 6 weeks, 7 weeks, weeks went by. The lady that passed, we never got to do the trust, so they knocked at the door and said, there was brother and sister. They said, hey, you know what, can I, we don't know what's going to happen, Tia. My mom never did the trust. The attorney's saying that we might have to sell it. We might be able to keep it, but we want to know when you're going to leave. She goes, oh, no, mijo. What happens is that before your mom died, she told me that half of this house was mine, and she took out a business card and said, this is the information from my attorney. So fast forward, they ended up giving the aunt like $50,000, have her sign a document that she's not going to contest it through probate. That was never true. They were just very distraught in the sense where, they said we not only lost mom, but we lost what's considered our second mom. How can she do this to us? It just so happens that, unfortunately, if nothing established and you're no longer here to say, no, that's not true, or this is how I want it, family members kind of go crazy when money's involved. They contest everything, arguments start, they start fighting, and mom hasn't even, or dad hasn't even been buried. But when you have that trust, even if that happens, they know that there's just certain rules as to how everything's going to be handled because you have that trust document. Mm-hmm. So it definitely, it's worth everything, because otherwise, especially in our Latino community, because we've worked so hard, our parents, day in, day out, 1 job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs.
Right.
And we get them into homes, and, it's nice that we get them into homes, but what happens, we leave our houses in the morning, but we don't know if we're going to come back. There might be some crazy drunk driver or something might happen when they get into an accident. Right. They're no longer come back. And if we don't educate our customers, and if we don't educate our kids, and we educate our community as to the benefits of having that, like other, ethnicity groups, then, we're going to fall into, all these problems. In our home countries, we tend to have certain rules, and because we come from such a vast number of Latin American countries, our customers kind of think that those rules might apply here. One of them being that if I do the trust, is my kids are already gonna be they're entitled to the inheritance. No, when you have the trust, you're able to refinance, purchase your home, buy other homes. You're able to do a whole number of things, but you're just sheltered under the trust.
So on title, would it be the homeowner or property owner's name, or would it be the name out on the trust that's on title?
So there's different ways of holding it under the title. We tend to put, the Llanes, my last name is Llanes, like the Llanes Family Trust, dated March 14th, 2023. There's no name attached to that trust. Other parties tend to put, Cesar E. Llanes, trustee of the Llanes Family Trust, dated whatnot. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. That privacy is what a lot of customers like, because, there's no public record of the trust. So it just shows who the trust name is. Mm. So it's not that customers are trying to hide anything or anything of the sort, but just that privacy that you're able to handle that.
What do you mean exactly?
Like, for example, when, if we want to see if you're owner of any property, with your first and last name, we pull title. Oh. And we're able to see, gotcha. Jaime, owns 15 properties. And there might be different type of Jaimes, but, last names and everything, so we're able to kind of pinpoint better. If we pull title under Jaime, then all his properties are under the trust, then it's not going to come up. You would have to specifically know which address you have to kind of see who the owner of that. And if you happen to find that, and you happen to pull title, and it shows, the Argentina Family Trust, they'll be like, okay, well, who are the owners of the Argentina Family Trust?
Right.
We don't know. They can't knock on your door and say, hey, Jaime, show me your trust, some random person. No. That'd be
Right.
court ordered or whatnot, but in order for that to happen, people have to invest money and stuff like that, or
Gotcha.
have to have a reason why to do that. So
Gotcha.
that privacy, that it's one of the benefits of having a trust.
And could you have a trust within a trust? I don't even know if that's a thing, but and if so, like, what's the benefit? Or if
You can. There's a lot of people, celebrities that have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different types kind of trust. You just change the ownership. So the ownership of that trust will be, the Llanos Family Trust, and the owners will be, the Logrono Family Trust or whatever trust.
Gotcha.
Corporations tend to do it that way too. So you establish your trust, and then customers may have a trucking business, may have a real estate business, may have a mortgage business, and they have it under, let's say, like an LLC or an S corp. So the ownership of that will be the trust. So if I look into the Secretary of State website and let me see who the owner of XYZ, it's going to show me who the owners of the XYZ, who are the statutory agents, what's the address is,
Right.
and it'll show the history of the complete property. So if you want to go and look for that person, you're able to. But if you have the owners of XYZ is the Argentina Family Trust, like, okay, and you have it under a P.O. box or whatnot, that they can't get a hold of you. The same thing
Got
with a
it.
corporation, with a home. You pull everything through title and it's under the trust. Once again, it's not about hiding anything. It's just that protection. A lot of people like that privacy of not their business being out
Right.
there.
So I have a question. So the trust is, I guess, the way I see it is like an instruction manual for once they pass, right? Like what's going to happen to their assets or whatever it is that they put in the trust. What happens for the next generation? So I'll give you an example. Let's
Mhm.
just say my mom and leaves me a whole bunch of assets, right? She passes away, so I'm here with all these assets. But then I pass away, right? Before I pass away, do I need to make a new trust to designate who's going to get what to my family members or my heirs?
That would be the most ideal way of doing it. But if you decide to keep it under the trust, all those assets, and you happen to pass, when you have the trust, the distribution, there's a distribution clause method in the trust where it indicates either, let's say you and your sister, let's say 2 siblings.
Sure.
If the distribution is per stripes, then it would go down to your kids. So you happen to pass, and they weren't able to change it or amend the trust at any point in time, or you weren't able to put your properties or those assets under your own trust, then your kids will inherit that money. If they're below the age of 18, then it's protected under what's called a Coogan account to make sure that, it's protected and not, given, let's say, to their guardian, and their guardian are going to be like, mijo, Jaime wanted me to drive you around in this Mercedes, and he wanted me to carry you around this Gucci bag. No.
Yeah.
And then once your kids turn 18, they're not going to have any money. So it's protected under that. The ideal thing would be that, you happen to receive those assets and you move those assets into your own trust. And in your own trust, you'll be able to have, who you indicate who your beneficiaries are. Aside from your kids, if you, maybe sisters, wife, whatever it may be.
Gotcha. And what if it's like a property, like a rental property, right? That just it cash flows every month, right? And obviously, like it's making money, whether the owner of the property passes away or not. Like it's still making money because it's filled with tenants, right? In that example, I'm trying to see how can I phrase it. In that example, would Would it be deposited into a regular bank account? How does that work?
So your mom inherits you a 8-unit building
Sure.
in San Fernando. So you have it under the trust now. You are the successor trustee, the person in charge of handling all affairs of the trust, but you're also the beneficiary. So you have full control of the trust.
Okay.
What happens is you establish a trust account, and whatever money comes in from there will be distributed into that account.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be able to collect payments from the rent and utilize that money as you may want to, because you're the 100% beneficiary of that.
Got it.
Let's say it's brother and sister, same scenario, and it's a 50-50, meaning 50% goes to your sister, 50% goes to you. Then if you accumulated $10,000 worth in rent, then be like, hey sis, here's $5,000 for you, here's $5,000 for me, as indicated in the trust. And you can continue on that. You're not obligated to sell it. You're not, there's nobody going to be pushing you to, oh, you got to sell, you got to sell, you got to sell.
Yeah.
No, because it's vested under the trust.
So if I understood you correctly, it's like a special account where if it's brother and sister, right, we both can get from that account,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not like a regular bank account, or
It's a regular bank account. It's a regular.
It's just
checking-
under a trust,
It's just under a trust. So it shelters it under a trust.
and we both have access to it.
They both will have access to it.
In that example that you just gave, let's just say I didn't want the full 5,000. Do I
Mhm.
still have to take out the 5,000 and put it into my personal account, or
You can take it out and put it into your personal account.
okay?
That trust account is the bridge between the tenants and you.
Got
So
it.
they can't give you the money and then you distribute it to the way that of your liking.
And am I taxed on top of that, or
It would fall under that. You would have to obviously consult your like CPA or tax
Right.
preparer, and they'll be able to kind of guide as to how you will be to maneuver everything for that particular trust. The accountant might say, okay, you know what? You have the trust from your mom that left you. It's best for you to open another trust and then transfer that money. That trust that you're doing will have to do taxes as well, so you'll be able to distribute how everything will go, deductions and all that good stuff.
Gotcha. Very cool. So
So it's not like a magical account or anything like that. It's a regular
right.
checking account, savings account, just that the vesting of it's under the trust.
So I know you're not a CPA or anything like that, but so when you own rental property, the way it's filed, it's normally under a Schedule E form, right? So it would still stay within a Schedule E, right? And it would just show, in terms of ownership, it would just show the trust.
The trust, yeah. So I had a particular customer that owned a 8-unit building in Pacoima.
Mm-hmm.
His accountant or his tax preparer recommended for him to open an LLC, which would benefit him more tax-wise. So when I set everything up is we set up the trust. Once the trust has been set up, we set up the LLC. The ownership of that LLC was the trust.
Mm.
So that way he's able to have that protection, because there's tenants and all this, that. It'd be good to talk to your insurance agent, make sure you have the proper coverage for that. But you're definitely able to do that, to vest it under that LLC and protect it. So when you do, for tax purposes, if your tax preparer says, Jaime, there's no need for you to establish an LLC because we can do everything through your Schedule E, then obviously that would be the way to go. But majority of the times, if you have multifamily, it's better to separate both things because you have tenants, you have exposure, you have
Right.
a lot of people walking in walking in your apartments, so you want to make sure you kind of separate. But obviously, the tax benefit from having an LLC will be surpassed for you just doing it under Schedule E, because you'll be able to deduct a lot more, and that protection will be greater.
Gotcha. So it's just a huge umbrella of protection,
Yes.
pretty much.
It definitely is.
Got it. What are some other things that you think might be beneficial, that why people should have a trust? Like I guess, like, what are some, because like I had mentioned to you before, like I had gone to one seminar and that was it, right? But I didn't really look too into it. So what are some of the important things that you think everyone should know, or should at least understand why and how it will benefit them when they pass away for their heirs, right? Or anything else that you would want to share on that?
Yeah. So I did a trust for a lady that worked for the county where, they gave Medi-Cal, Medicaid, food stamps, and all that stuff. So I asked her, I said, what's the true, what is, everybody says, if my mom passed or my grandma passed, that Medi-Cal, Medicaid is going to take that property or put a lien on the property, especially our Latino community, they're afraid of that.
Yeah.
I got to put my son on title because that happens. So she said, Caesar, there's millions of homes just in LA County. The people that are in charge of that department is minimal. We don't have the manpower to cover that. So the only way we find out when someone passes, if it's in probate, because we receive information that such person died. So LA County, did John Doe owe you anything for the past 5-10 years or whatever it may be? Yeah, they owe us $200,000, whatever it may be. Perfect. Send us the information and we'll go ahead and make sure you get paid through probate.
Right.
But when you have it under the trust, that power is automatically, that transfer of power is automatically, so there's no courts involved. I had another customer that I opened, we did the trust. He had a 13-year-old son that he opened a checking account. So he calls me one day, didn't speak that much of English, and he says, hey, Caesar, can you help me? I think my son, the chamaco, he must have done something and his account got hacked.
Yeah.
So like, okay, he had like about $100 and something in the checking and $100 and something in savings. So he calls, so we go to Bank of America and we say, this account got hacked and whatnot. So the representative of Bank of America says, no, it didn't get hacked. It was levied. So he says, I'm guessing the dad owes money to the franchise tax board. So like, okay. So I said, can we get the opening documents where it showed that the account belongs to the minor? And, that was going to be a kind of an argument to try to get that money back. So when we called, there was a representative that helped us and gave us the number to a particular person at the franchise tax board. So when we got a hold of her, she explained that, in fact, the gentleman owed $5,000 in state taxes, and that any account that the gentleman was associated with, they were going to levy that account. So it was in his best interest to be removed from that account of the minor until he fixes that problem. So I was like, okay. I said, well, that's kind of weird because the dad has account at B of A as well and has enough money to cover the $5,000 that you owe. Is there any particular reason why you weren't able to go into that account? So she says, 1 second. She goes, okay, cool. We weren't able to go into that account because he's a trustee and that account's under a trust, so we can't touch that money. Well, there may be another benefit as to having that protection, I eventually helped them set up a payment plan.
Right.
The kid got the money back. He was able to set up the payment plan, but those are what kind of the benefits as to why. That's kind of going back to.
So not even the IRS can get the money.
I don't know 100% if that may be true or adequate, but in this particular case, they weren't able
to get it.
To get that money, and he had way enough money to. He had like maybe $30,000 or something like that. So
wow.
They weren't able to take it. They took the 200 and change from the son,
right?
But they weren't able to take that money from that. Now he had an EIN number. It was the living trust, the revocable living trust, and that good stuff. So it's definitely a benefit that to have it, and these are like real life scenarios where
right.
customers have happened to.
And what happens? So this is when someone passes away, but what
Mhm.
happens if someone's still alive and their assets aren't in a trust?
They aren't?
They are.
Okay.
So if someone's in they're alive, right?
Mhm.
All their assets are under that trust. Can those, like, let's just say, if I owe someone money, right? Can
Mhm.
the collector still come after my assets?
I believe they can't into certain portion. Like, once again, I'm not an attorney.
Right.
Just an idea, but from experiences that happen, they haven't been able to. Now, that's not for say that it can't happen,
Sure.
but it just kind of goes down to that portion. If a state agency or a city agency are not able to get the money, I would imagine that if maybe you get sued, for something really bad or whatnot, they can possibly penetrate that.
Right.
Like, for example, when you have a corporation, you have that corporate curtain that a lot of people say, but you tend to open a corporation one time and then you forget about minutes, you forget about bylaws, you forget about all this.
Sure.
And if you have all that documentation in order, then that curtain is there, stable, from doing that. But to kind of answer your question, it kind of will depend on a case by case, I would imagine, in the sense where, it's better to have that than not to have anything.
Right.
And there's also that one that the state of California has, a Declaration of Homestead, where the state sponsors that Declaration of Homestead, where it protects it from, I believe it was 70%, and then you're only liable for like 30 or 40%. But that's just from maybe a civil lawsuit. But when you have a trust, it doesn't protect it if you pass. You're not going to say, okay, only take 60, 70% from that and give me the rest.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. The trust is the one that gives you that full power to everything.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So, how can people get started? Like, if they wanted to get more information, or if they wanted to start, like, how long is the process? Can you walk me through that?
Yeah. So, for example, once I meet with a customer, 99% of the times I visit the customer at their home.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they happen to have particular items there that they might be easily accessible, like life insurance policies, 401ks, cash plans, corporate bonds, stocks, crypto, whatever it may be.
Right.
Checking accounts, everything. It'll be a long laundry list of everything that we needed. So when we sit down, I go over the questionnaire and ask the questions accordingly, how they want everything to be done. We not only establish the living trust, but it also establishes part of the whole package. You establish a pour-over will, which names any assets that are not named under the trust, so it kind of shelters them. It's very important to know that you have to establish a general power of attorney, because if mom, dad happen to get in a car accident,
Right.
or they get disabled or aren't able to perform basic duties as to make mortgage payments, property taxes, and whatnot, or they happen to be in a coma and they're the only ones that are on that particular account. So it's very important to have that power of attorney. Medical power of attorney with COVID, with the medical directive, what's going to happen to Jaime if he's in a coma? Do you want to be disconnected at a certain period of time? Who's going to do that? What are your terms? You want to wait 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks? Do you want to exhaust all medical? So it's very important to have that.
Wow, it's more than just wealth. It's like
yeah.
Wow.
And then what happens is you have to establish what's called a living will. What's going to happen to Jaime if he happens to pass? Do you want your body cremated? Do you want your body buried? How? Where? What's going to happen to your ashes? I had a lady that wanted menudo and pozole and menudo to reserve that at a viewing. She wanted everybody dressed in white, and she wanted salsa and merengue to be playing. She didn't want
Wow.
no sadness, no nothing. She wanted her life to be celebrated. I had another lady that wanted to be buried in her wedding gown, her wedding dress. So it's many of us don't think about it, or we think about it at one point in time, but you know, if you don't know, then who knows? Then those documents are gonna indicate how everything is to be done. Kind of going back to the medical power attorney, if there's a lot of siblings, and something happens to mom, then mom probably told dad, at one point in time, hey honey, if something happens to me, let me go.
Right.
Don't keep me there. I don't want to be in that vegetative state. And then it happens, and then dad says, no, we got to disconnect her. Then the kids are going to be like, Dad, you're crazy. What do you mean? We got to fight for mom, but not knowing that those were her wishes. So once you have that established, it's kind of a law, not law, but it's the wishes that mom wanted. We establish a certificate of trust. It's very important to have a certificate of trust, because now that all your assets are going to be under a living trust, it's like a 50-page living trust, where you don't want to scan that or have that sent to banks and everybody, where all your business is there, how you want everything to distribute to your clause and stuff. So any financial transaction that you might have, it'd be best to have it under your certificate of trust, because that certificate of trust shows who the power players are, who are the decision makers in the trust. So it's a 2-page paper that definitely allows that. Being as a mortgage professional, if it's under a trust, the banks that you're dealing with may accept that certificate of trust or may want the full access to the whole thing. And I have to prepare the grant deed packages that are sent to the particular county where the property is located. So I have to make sure that everything is taken care of, so that way when everything goes out, it gets prepared and it gets delivered to the particular. So it embodies all that. It's just not just one little thing. We have to make sure, at least I believe that is, make sure, it's like you said, we help them buy a home, and who's going to protect it? Okay, then we help them create the trust. Who's going to protect it? But there's stuff that happens on a daily basis: car accidents, strokes, heart attacks. It's better to have all those ducks in a row. So if mom or dad are in a hospital and they say, do you have a medical director, or does your mom have a medical power of attorney? You'll be like, ding, 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 yes. It's in that binder that Caesar gave us. So it's definitely.
So this is good for everyone, per se, like even if you don't have any assets, because like you said, like medical things can come up, right? Heart attacks or whatever the case may be, right? So this is really a vehicle for everyone should be taking advantage of.
Everybody, if you're mom and dad and have young children, the proper will would name who the guardians will be,
right,
of the children if something happens to both of you. It facilitates everything for the court, because the court knows that these were mom and dad's wishes. So that's the important thing. At the end of the day, it comes out to legality-wise as to the court has to make a decision on your behalf if you don't have nothing established. But if you have something established under a trust, then they can't go against it, because those were your wishes.
Got it.
So it's one of the most brilliant things that was probably created. Not only here in the U.S., all over the world, because all over the world you have certain things, and in Latin America they're named differently. They're named testamentos, fideicomisos en vida, testamento en vida.
So I have a question, because I know you said you're licensed here for LA County, right? So what happens if you have assets outside of the U.S., right? Do you need, and I don't know if it's too technical, but do you need to have that in the living trust here in the U.S. stating that? No?
No.
So
we can name it, but it has no legal binding in any other country, because each country is different. If you take that trust and you take it to Argentina or Peru or Ecuador,
It doesn't mean
they're
anything.
gonna laugh at us. They're gonna be like, "Oh, that's
So
nice of you."
You need to basically do something over there.
Do something over there.
Got
Do
it. So in
something.
every country that you have some sort of asset, property, or whatever the case may be, you need to have, you need to have that established at that country.
At that particular country.
Correct.
By naming it, by naming it in the trust here in the U.S., and if you reside here, it
Mhm.
kind of the living trust is. I remember the telenovelas growing up, watching it, and the attorney would say, or the person in charge would say, Jaime, they left them the house in Cancun, Caesar, they left the house in Puerto Vallarta. It's a very similar situation because that book shows what mom and dad had while they were alive. And if it shows something that they had in El Salvador and Mexico, then they'll be able to kind of say, okay, you know what, I know this doesn't apply over there, but they're saying that they have a piece of land in Michoacan, for example.
Right.
So then kind of guide them towards the right direction. What I tend to tell the customers is, do the trust here, do a testamento in their home countries, bring that document and put it under one binder. You live here, put it in this binder, then that way you'll be able to, your kids or whoever you're leaving everything will have a better idea and not go hunting like a treasure hunt, as to where to go. If it's trouble here, when you die and don't have anything, I can assure you that there's going to be a lot more trouble in our own countries because it's a lot of more rules and bureaucracy and stuff like that.
Wow.
It creates a lot of headaches.
It's easier to lose in other countries, in other words.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. But here is obviously as well,
Right.
because that document, like I always say, if one of the other things that our customers, that are Latino customers, like I was telling you earlier, tend to do is they tend to put or add their kids into title.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I'm gonna add my son into title because I couldn't qualify to refinance, so I'm gonna add him into title.
Right.
And then I couldn't tell you how many times I've been in the kitchen table, living room table, the dining table, sorry, where the kids say, no, I'm not gonna sign off on this because you put me on title and I'm on the loan and now I'm owner of this property.
Wow.
And they only went on title because
So they could qualify.
They can qualify. Or they were or what they do is they say, you know what, for me, if something happens to me, to make sure that everything's okay, I want to put the property under my kids.
So
Worst mistake you can make.
if they would have had the trust to begin with, then
They wouldn't need to do that because the trust indicates who the beneficiaries will be. If mom and dad really want to protect it or really want you to have it, then guide them. Tell them, okay, don't add me into title because if something happens to me, if I'm driving down the road and I get distracted looking at the cell phone and I happen to get in a car accident and I'm at fault, then what happens? Then the attorneys, whoever, are involved with the car accidents, they can potentially go after your property, which is not yours. Your mom added you or your parents added you into title because of qualifying.
Wow.
So now you're exposing it a lot more. So if you really want them to be protected, tell them, guide them. Don't send them to me, send them to whoever, but make sure you put them under the trust because that would be the best way to protect everything.
wow. So if someone wanted to get started, how can they reach you?
They can reach me, my Instagram is, the Cesar Yanes. We'll put it up. It's, THEE, Cesar Yanes at Instagram. My cell phone number is, 818-941-7912. And I can definitely reach out. The process kind of just to show you how it goes is we meet with the customer. We gather all the information. Once we gather everything, everything's taken back to the office.
Right.
We start pulling, my team and I, we start pulling up title, making sure everything's okay. We generate the trust, we generate the EIN if they want to. Then we set up the appointment with them. We have notaries in-house that the whole package includes all that. So I go to the customer's house with the notary. We review everything, make sure names are spelled correctly, date of births, that everything that they indicated in the beginning is written down the way that they want to. Not necessarily page by page, but we make sure that everything's done. If everything's okay, then we go ahead and start signing and notarizing. Grant deeds are I have an envelope with pre-printed labels as to where the grant deeds are going to go to that particular county. Before we were able to go and record it I was able to go and record it for them, but because there was a lot of fraud in that, unfortunately we're not able to do that anymore. So if the customer would want to go, I can set up the appointment for them with Lee County, Riverside County, San Bernardino County, which they can go show their ID that they're the owners and do that like instantly. That process normally takes about maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then they receive it. But once we sign and we notarize everything, then that's when it becomes a legal document. The customer stays with all copies. I stay with a digital copy, but it's an unsigned digital copy, meaning there's no signatures or anything like that. I asked them if they want me to email that to, their kids or to themselves, just to have kind of like a record, but it's not to just, hey, I lost that copy, let me print it out and have it notarized again. You don't want to do that. We have to put a clause in there that if that were to happen, then the one that we're reprinting and re-signing is a duplicate, but no changes have been made. You don't want that other trust showing up 15 years later, and there's going to be a conflict. Like, which one do I go by?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and you can always amend the trust. Just as family grows, people are born, same thing, people pass away. So it's always good to amend the trust if anything happens with your loved ones.
How often should someone be reviewing the trust?
I would say in any like major event that happens in the family, death.
Good or bad?
Good or bad. And it's always good to do it. We tend to be busy on a daily basis. Yeah, I'll get to that. But if you're able to kind of set that time and say, okay, let me fix it right now, they just contact me if I happen to do the trust, and whatever change needs to be made, we'll go ahead and make it, amend it, and once again, set everything up, put it into the trust, notarize it, and have it there ready.
I just thought of something right now. Again, I don't know if you can answer this. I know you're not an attorney, but based off your experience, what if, let's just say I owned properties, right? And I put it all in the trust, and then I get married, right? And then I get divorced. Can that trust protect that spouse trying to go after the assets, or?
That's $1 million question. Once again, I'm not an attorney or anything, but what I have seen and what I have friends that are attorneys is that if you can prove that if you had a house, let's say you had a house,
right,
and that is under the trust, you got it prior to you getting married. If you can prove that whatever money, the mortgage came from a separate account, not from your joint account, yes. It's my understanding that if it comes together, then be like commingling, and then she can be like, well, I pay for it too, whatnot. But it definitely shelters it. You have that option, and it's always good to have that, if you, or do a prenuptial agreement. It's always good to have that
right.
in order, because, if people start arguing about inheritance and they're blood related, I couldn't imagine if you're not blood related but you're married, and if there's hundreds of thousands involved, they'll try to get that, you know. But if you have all that in a row, you'll be able to do that. But that always comes up. But that is, once again, that's not legal advice. That's what I've seen
Right.
or heard, that if you're able to prove that, then you're good.
Very cool. I think this was super helpful, right? And you kind of opened up my eyes a little bit more, because I only saw it as a tool for people that had assets, but it's not just for that. It's for everything.
For everything. People have, you know, a lot of people that have businesses that have a lot of exposure, truck drivers, construction companies,
Right.
you know, that they have employees working that can maybe try to come after your assets. It's always good to have that. So having a business is the same thing as having an asset, you know. It may be a multi-million-dollar company, you know, maybe a very small company, but it's always good to have it protected. So who's going to run the business when you're no longer here? Or who's going to access the money to make payroll if you don't have the right documentation? It's going to halt everything. So it's very important to have that.
Wow. Very cool. Well, was there anything that you wanted to ask me or anything like that? Or
No, just thank you so much. I really appreciate the fact that when you said early this morning, you said, well, I wanted to have something where customers, you know, we help them protect or help them buy the assets, but then what happens?
Yeah.
You know, you tend to celebrate it with a bottle of champagne or a bottle of tequila, but that buzz may go down in 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes, but if you help them protect that investment for their life, that is one of the most important things. And I've always been an advocate for that, you know, and for you to recognize that is very admirable, and I appreciate that. And I thank you very much for inviting me and allowing me to kind of share a little bit about it. It means a lot.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to, after this, I would definitely love to kind of get your information, because I definitely want to send it to all my previous clients, right? And kind of showcase what, now they're homeowners, right? That they should probably speak with you and how you can help them and why it's beneficial. But no, thank you for making the time. I know you're very busy, so I appreciate you making your way over here. And
Thank you.
I know we're going to be working together a lot. So
Perfect.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Cool.